Welcome to another wonderful day for Bhagavad Gita Sadhana. That is a dedicated practice to learning more about life, yoga, philosophy, and yourself with the help of one of the greatest books and most read books of all time, the Bhagavad Gita. I've translated it as the song of your soul. Gita means soul, and Bhagavad refers to Krishna. However, if we look at the symbolism of this book, Krishna represents your innermost self. And the focus of the Gita is how do you figure out who you are at your core and then be true to that, no matter what. I've mentioned this before, but as someone who's worked with people who are dying, the people who are true to themselves have a much different experience of passing away from this material world than those who never find themselves or listen to that inner voice. It's kind of a downer, huh? Well, we're referring back to chapter 6, verse 7, about how you can really tell if you're established in your true self, or conversely, if you're like, well, how do I get there? Here are some ideas. And we'll be with this verse for a bit because it's jam packed with goodness, like many things in the Gita. You might even memorize this verse. It's fun to memorize the Gita. Also, a wonderful exercise for the mind, yoga for the mind. So, chapter 6, verse 7, as a reminder, goes like this: The true self of the self controlled stays balanced in the cold and heat, in pleasure and in suffering, in honor and in shame alike. Hmm. Well, yesterday, and if you missed the video, you can always go back and catch it. Yesterday, we talked about being the same in cold and heat. Today, we'll focus on the line about pleasure and suffering. And learning how to be the same. That is so hard. If you've ever tended a wounded animal, for example, the kindest, gentlest animal, when they're hurt, can attack easily or be vicious, and it's because of the pain and the suffering. In Sanskrit, the words are sukh and dukh, which don't literally mean pleasure and suffering. They are they represent two ends of experience as an embodied being. And sukha can be comfort and ease and delight and joy or pleasure, and dukkha can be sadness and sickness and discomfort and suffering. And where we fall on that spectrum has a lot to do with the spiritual connection we've developed. I mean, many of us have heard about people who have gone through experiences many of us would label as horrific, and yet they come out with a benefit from it somehow. Things that would make many of us just curl up, die, curse the world, become vicious like a wounded animal. They turn it into something good that they can use for themselves and for others. That's a highly spiritual achievement, extremely. And if we can start doing that, we know we're established more fully in our true selves. So today's practice is dedicated to. So I was reflecting on pleasure and suffering last night because, as many of you know, I'm a baseball fan, and my pleasure is somebody else's suffering. And so today I'm dedicating this to Cookie and to Bo. Cookie is a pitcher for a baseball team, and he was diagnosed with leukemia at a very young age as he was at the height of his pitching. And he actually came back from that to pitch again, which is astonishing. Bo has been going through, like many of us do in life, real ups and downs. He's been brought up to the major leagues, but he wasn't quite performing up to his potential as an offensive person. And he's just made a few tweaks. He's stuck with it, and now he's improved. He's growing into what everybody knew he could be. And then there's Coach Kit, who I have to say is psychic. So, but more about that at another time. So, good job. Those are folks that have stayed steady through pleasure and suffering, especially Coach Kit and her fan appreciation for Onion. But then on the other side, those folks are doing well. And then the other team, the White Sox that we played last night, are suffering. So, any situation, there can be pleasure or suffering. One team wins, one team loses, for example. How do we stay true to ourselves? Whether we're like a player in the game of life, sometimes we don't live up to our potential. Sometimes we have things come at us that aren't fair. Can we still stay true to our destiny, finding who we are and living that? Or do we choose the way of suffering and maybe give up right at the end when it's most important? The choice is always ours. It's a hard choice, especially if we have patterns that let us default to the suffering. It can be easy to default to suffering. Maybe when you were younger, suffering was the only way to get people's attention. I know I developed allergy. I have a very clear remembrance of how I developed some allergies I have. And that was I was suffering and didn't have the words to, I was very young. I didn't have the words to express it. And I remember thinking to myself, if only people could see how much I'm suffering. And from that day forward, actually, I had these allergies that manifested as bright red hives that all could see. And I've done some work since, and I've noticed that my allergic responses have greatly decreased. Finding the true self and finding the ability to express that can be hugely healing. So, can we do that today? Let's express ourselves physically in our balanced pose, and then we'll have some time to reflect and to become closer to our true self. Oh, and I almost forgot. I mentioned this on other social media. I got my gallon donor pin. Talk about doing something. I don't enjoy giving blood. When I'm doing it, it's a suffering. At the end, it's a bit of a pleasure, though, to know that I've helped people. So, can I stay constant and keep giving, and doing that's important to me? We'll find out. Let's find out. All right. Let's switch. And come on back. I modified because my left knee is suffering. So the pose might not have looked quite the same, but the essence of it did remain that. As we contemplate today, I really invite you to reflect either on something that you know is coming in life that you find to be either pleasurable or suffering. You know it's coming, and you can mentally rehearse how do you want to be true to yourself in that situation. All right. How do you want to be true to yourself? and not let either the pleasure or the suffering sweep you into something or someone you'd rather not be. That's 5. Welcome back. We were doing a little spiritual Olympics. Many members of the Olympic gymnastics team here in the US, like Simone Biles, are reported to do visualization so that they perform great when they're under pressure. We're all under pressure in our lives. The best thing you can do is be your real self when that happens and embrace that, because your real self is wonderful. And I look forward to connecting with your wonderful self again very soon. Until then.